So joining us now is Walter Isaacson, author of the new book, Elon Musk. He is also an advisory partner at Perella Weinberg and a CNBC contributor. First of all, congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
It is incredible. I actually have it here. I have not gotten through the whole thing yet. But I do want to start here. I do want to start with this notion of Saudi Arabia and Musk and the relationship there, because whether today's information report from Wall Street Journal was false or not, it kind of highlights the fact that there is a history here between these two entities going back to the now infamous tweet about funding secured. And I guess just walk us through some of the historical context.
You know, I think like Saudi Arabia's relationship with the United States, it's complex with Tesla as well. As you said, that famous tweet in 2018, funding secured, he acted as if the Saudi investment fund was all ready to back his effort to take take Tesla private. And if they weren't really ready, it becomes a problem. Now, the Saudis have had investments in Twitter, and they've rolled over some of those investments. But Musk is not really talking to them now about, I don't think, he says he's not, and I believe he's not, talking about building a factory now in Saudi Arabia. His focus is on the next generation, inexpensive global car that'll be done first in Mexico, but also with an assembly line in Austin, Texas, because he likes his designers to sit next to the assembly line. And there are many places he's talking about, including Turkey, as you said, but I wouldn't hold my breath for Saudi Arabia.
Okay, got it. So Turkey could potentially be in the running. I mean, there's also been talk of India as well.
Yes, and I think he's going to India. There are a lot of places. And if he's going to make this inexpensive global car, there'll be millions made, he is going to design a platform, but more importantly, a factory that will make the platform, an assembly line. And it will be highly automated, I would guess. He spends a lot of time. I've seen him spend a lot of time going station by station and what a factory should look like and what do you automate and what do you not automate. And as you just talked about the United Auto Workers strike and everything else, I think having a lot of options in the future with highly automated factories that can be replicated, I think that's a good strategy.
I guess, so how does that speak to the navigation of Musk, of all the geopolitical cross-currents? I mean, Turkey is an ally and a member of NATO. It's an ally of the U.S. It's a member of NATO, but it can be a little bit of a tense relationship in and of itself. India, we know, is benefiting strongly from the tensions between the U.S. and China. He's obviously got a big footprint in China with Tesla, too. He does seem to move around and communicate with and negotiate with world leaders in a way that, dare I say, seems, maybe Saudi Arabia excluded, seems a little bit smoother than others sometimes.
Well, definitely. I think a lot of countries, be it India or Turkey, would and have said they would love to have a Tesla plant. And I think that he also has, you know, he controls his whole supply chain. When he first took over, when he first was putting together the group that was Tesla, they were making the batteries in Japan, and the battery packs would then be in Thailand and England. They put them in the chassis. And he wants end-to-end control, just like Steve Jobs did. So he'll be making his own batteries, making his own battery cells. And there'll be a lot of places where I think he's going to want to have investments. Speaking
of world leaders, apparently reports today that Musk says Twitter, now X, is moving to a small monthly subscription, has 550 million users, and this apparently came up in a live stream conversation with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Have you heard anything about this idea of a subscription? I mean, I know you have to pay to be verified, but could we be seeing an overhaul of the economic model there in general?
Absolutely. I don't think he wants it to be advertising dependent. More than 20 years ago, he created X.com, which morphed into PayPal, and he wanted it to be a payments platform, a place where people could post content and even get paid for it. And from the very beginning, even before he took over Twitter, but after he made the offer in April, he said it was an accelerant to create what he wanted to do 20 years earlier, and then got ousted when it was PayPal. So I think that he wants to get away from a pure advertising model. Obviously, there'll be subscriptions, but there'll also be ways to pay for things. You look at WeChat and other things around the world. They're able to do that. And I think his live stream with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, was fascinating today. They also talked about anti-Semitism. Netanyahu talked to him about that. And Musk is just quite controversial. The problem is not the ADL for X, the platform that used to be known as Twitter. The problem is advertisers don't want to be in a very contentious, controversial, sometimes toxic place. So I think, A, he's got to tone that down a bit, and B, he's got to find other revenue than advertising.